Special Counsel Jack Smith has some major decisions to make about unprecedented times that we now live in with Donald Trump's return to the White House coming off of Tuesday's election. He's got decisions to make in the Lago case, focused on Espionage Act violations and obstruction of justice, and about the D.C. election interference case against Donald Trump. Something's got to be done, likely before the inauguration. We've heard rumors that the special counsel, following Department of Justice guidelines, may before even Donald Trump's inauguration, dismiss those cases. We don't have perfect confirmation of that, but we do have some new filings to report on right here on the MeidasTouch Network and on Legal AF. So on the newest filing just today, we've got Jack Smith informing Judge Chutkan in the D.C. election interference case first. It's the first public filing by Jack Smith in the case since the election. And here's what he has to say in an unopposed motion to vacate or throw away the briefing schedule. He says, listen to these words. It's only a paragraph long, but I think it's very, very important in telling about his next steps. As a result of the election held on November 5th, the defendant is expected to be certified as president-elect on January 6, 2025, and inaugurated on January 20th, 2025. The government respectfully requests that the court, that's Judge Chutkan, vacate the remaining deadlines in the pretrial schedule to afford the government time to assess, in his words, this unprecedented circumstance and determine the appropriate course going forward, consistent with Department of Justice policy. He wants to file by December 2nd, 2024, Popok's birthday, by the way. The government will file a status report or otherwise inform the court of the result of its deliberations. The government has consulted with Donald Trump's lawyers and they do not object. Respectfully submitted for Jack Smith, his lawyers. Now look, let's talk about what this means. I agree with him. This is an unprecedented circumstances. It's only the second time in American history that a president has regained the White House after having been thrown out on a rail, driven out on a rail in a prior term. Donald Trump's a one-term president automatically on the way in. He's almost lame duck on the way in. But any prosecution of a now sitting president is going to run afoul of longstanding Department of Justice policy about prosecuting a now somebody who's been reelected to the presidency. Has the decision been made? No. Is the writing on the wall? Yes. He's asking for more time, though. He's asking for about 3 weeks to report back just after Thanksgiving and after he watches, I'm sure, what happens on the 16th of November. The 26th of November with the potential sentencing of Donald Trump in the New York case. I think he wants to get over that particular critical deadline and that milestone. See what happens. Judge Merchan up in New York on the 36 count felony conviction of Donald Trump before he was even president has to decide if the immunity act, the immunity decision by the Supreme Court applies to that case at all before he was president, and then sentence him. I think Jack Smith wants to keep an eye on that as well. But let's not blow smoke or sunshine here on Legal AF from the MeidasTouch Network. There is longstanding Department of Justice policy against continuing a prosecution against somebody who's occupying the Oval Office. Does it mean they can't do it after? Okay, but we know what Donald Trump will do. Donald Trump has already said that if Jack Smith's still hanging around on January 20th at 12:01 p.m., he's going to fire him. He's going to fire him, and then it's a two-step dance. He'd have to pick out an acting attorney general until one is confirmed and have that person fire Jack Smith and end all the special counsel prosecutions. That is definitely something that he will do. In advance, it looks like Jack Smith's going to make the decision to dismiss the case. Now, the question is he going to dismiss it with prejudice? And what happens if he just waits out Donald Trump until the 4 years is over? Donald Trump no longer is cloaked. And can he then prosecute him? And I think the answer to that is likely no, because either Donald Trump is going to do self-pardon. And yes, we'll bring that up to the United States Supreme Court, but Supreme Court Justice like Neil Gorsuch during oral argument over the summer during the immunity decision anticipated that self-pardon might be appropriate and invited that type of argument. Or He resigns a week or two before the end of the presidency or some other time during the presidency, turns over the reins of power to J.D. Vance, the vice president, who becomes president in that moment and gives him a pardon. He's going to get pardoned either way. And so will all the co-conspirators who worked with Donald Trump, all the unindicted co-conspirators in the D.C. election interference case, Giuliani and Jeff Clark and Boris Epstein, Sidney Powell and the rest. They're all going to be absolved. They're all going to be pardoned or given clemency. And so is the people that worked against democracy in the Mar-a-Lago case to obstruct justice in Walt Nauta and Carlos de Oliveira in that case. So there's not going to be a case left to continue to prosecute in the future because of the pardon power. And watch Donald Trump do that two-step. If he feels there's a threat about his self-pardon not being valid at the constitutional U.S. Supreme Court level, he steps down a day before the end of his term or at some other time, turns it over to J.D. Vance, who then becomes president and gives him the pardon. That's how it's going to work. We're going to keep an eye on it, of course, on Legal AF and the MeidasTouch Network. The reason we wanted to bring this to your attention is because what we're watching, and I'll do another hot take on this, is that Jim Jordan and the Judiciary Committee and the Oversight Committee with Loudermilk in Congress, who are going to continue to head those departments and those committees going forward when the new Congress comes in, assuming the Democrats can't find another few seats in the final counting to get into the lead. If they are in the lead and these people are still heading it, Jim Jordan and Loudermilk and the rest, they've already put Jack Smith, the Department of Justice, on notice that they want all of his files and all of his records preserved. So do I, by the way. I mean, it's one place I can get behind a MAGA agenda. I think everything that's in the special counsel's hands that hasn't already been made public should be made public, right? Should be released. Now it's not going to be released. Let's just call it for what it is here. Let's call it out. Jim Jordan is not going to release to the American public and put it on a website and that we can all link to and go take a look and rummage through it. He's going to cherry pick things here and there, and he's going to release those. And the minority on these committees is going to have to fight to get a hold of the records and release the rest. Let's leave it to Jamie Raskin to do his own minority report and use this information. This could well backfire. I'm going to talk about it in more detail in another hot take here on the MeidasTouch Network. But I don't think telling Jack Smith, keep your files intact is necessarily a bad thing for the Democrats, even in a minority position. There's a way to use it and make it available. There's a way to obtain it. Here's my argument. I think everybody is entitled to it. I think everybody under a public records request and a media request is entitled to this if the case gets permanently dismissed and Donald Trump is pardoned and the rest are pardoned. Then there's no threat of ongoing litigation. There's no threat of ongoing prosecution. And I think it becomes a matter of public record that we should be able to demand under a Freedom of Information Act request or under the minority of the Congress releasing it. We're going to continue to follow that and the next steps for Jack Smith. But let me just short circuit it here. Jack Smith's going to report back on the 2nd of December to the judge and the judges of the 11th Circuit. He'll be filing there any minute, telling the 11th Circuit, hold off on the briefing, hold off on oral argument on the Mar-a-Lago case. We got bigger fish to fry. We got bigger consequences, historical, unprecedented consequences that we need to evaluate. We're thoughtful. We're sober in our decision-making. We're going to get a team together at the Department of Justice. We're going to make a right decision for history and into the future. And that's what they're going to do. But at the end, not to be a spoiler, they're going to come back and they're going to have to dismiss these cases in advance. And if they don't, and they just decide they're going to go to the firing squad, then we know that day one, minute one of his presidency, Donald Trump is going to fire Jack Smith, go after the Department of Justice, and absolve everybody of their guilt and their responsibility here, criminal liability, including potentially himself. I will follow it all closely. I have to. That's what we have to do now as the rebel alliance against the empire and bring it down and bring it low, right? We got to shoot that phaser right down the air shaft and blow it up. And we have a way to do it with a strategy that we'll be outlining hourly and daily here on the MeidasTouch Network to use the court system to our advantage, to go after the executive orders of Donald Trump, tie up the legislation in Congress even in the minority position, and call attention and make public all of these items, or these radical cabinet members that he's thinking about confirming. We'll do it here. And you'll need this information. So join us. Hit the free subscribe button for the MeidasTouch Network. Do the same on Legal AF's YouTube channel that we do in collaboration with the MeidasTouch Network. And until my next contribution, which should be in about another half an hour, I'm Michael Popok, and I'm reporting. In collaboration with the MeidasTouch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories, the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.